Hurricane Milton is a powerful Category 5 hurricane with sustained winds of 180 miles an hour, with catastrophic impacts expected for the west coast of Florida. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Hi friends, Rusty back at Meteo Mundo. It's nice to see you on a late afternoon Monday. I wish it was under better circumstances, but coming up in this video, I do have all the newest information on Category 5 Hurricane Milton, a hurricane that has absolutely bombed out and has become so strong in just around a 24-hour time frame. We'll look at the newest information, the newest track, and the newest models, and where this could go, and just the high-end impacts it could bring to not only portions of Florida, but we can see some impacts today along the northern coastline of the Yucatan. I'll also have your Caribbean and Bahamas forecast as well. As we get started, you know I love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section below where you're viewing from, what the weather has been like. You have a specific question about the forecast, you can drop it down there as well. I hope this video answers a lot of those questions, and I appreciate you guys from across the world tuning in and watching what's going on. So we'll get started with kind of the here and now of Milton. Maybe you're just tuning in and you haven't really caught the update. I did do an earlier video. Milton has absolutely strengthened in a way that only maybe one or two other hurricanes ever have across recorded history. It went from a weak tropical storm early Sunday morning to now having winds of 180 miles an hour. This storm is absolutely a beast and could get slightly stronger. We'll talk about how that's going to play out down the road. But I wanted to first of all just give you these stats because they're mind-boggling. As of the 4 o'clock Central Daylight Time advisory on this Monday, winds are 180 miles an hour. That is sustained. That is a super high-end Cat 5. Pressure has plummeted down to 905 millibars. It's moving east at 10 miles an hour, currently located 675 miles from Tampa, Florida. This is the track with the watches and warnings. We will get more into this. There's a few things to note here. Hurricane warnings are now up for west central Florida, but deep inland as well. All of the Tampa, St. Petersburg area, but even Metro Orlando. Then you have hurricane watches, tropical storm watches and warnings north and south of that. We have a hurricane warning that is currently in effect for the northwestern side of the Yucatan Peninsula, as we could see some hurricane conditions brush that area here. Now, Milton is forecast to stay a major hurricane even at landfall, but there is likely going to be some weakening before landfall in the west coast of Florida, generally sometime very late Wednesday or early on Thursday. You notice that plot point near Tampa Bay is at 1 a.m. on Thursday. This is just a general view of this. We're going to deep dive into it, I promise you, but I wanted to show you that. Let's talk about how this will be impacting the Yucatan very briefly. First of all, the numbers that you see are wind gusts in miles an hour. So right now, Marita's doing okay, but this storm is just so strong. It should continue a basically due east track here. Let me just get rid of that little icon real quick too. But look at the lightning that's sticking with this eye. It's a small, compact, about 8-mile wide eye right now, but the outflow and the sheer size of this storm is absolutely incredible. Now the winds are going to freshen up in Brita, where we could have again some hurricane force conditions there. We could even see some tropical storm conditions as far east as Cancun and as far south as the Campeche area. All right. But again, when you just look at this storm on infrared satellite imagery, let's take a look at the visible satellite imagery as well. It's just as impressive. Hurricane hunters have been flying in and out of this storm constantly. All they continue to find is a stronger storm, a buzzsaw, if you will. Pressure's falling, significant thunderstorm convection, extremely high cloud tops. If you didn't see my video earlier today, the hurricane hunters have found hail in this storm. The clouds are so vertically stacked, they're getting into the ice layer and the higher levels of the atmosphere, and there is some hail being produced out of a 180-mile-an-hour hurricane. It's an unbelievable storm. And it will continue a slow easterly progression at first and then back up north and east. But again, the first areas to be impacted will be the northwest side of the Yucatan. I'm hoping that we stay generally at tropical storm strength winds here for the Merida area, but there could be some higher gusts. This is the enhanced water vapor imagery out of there. And again, you can just clearly see this storm is has its own moisture field. Nothing is going to stop it from staying very intense, at least over the next 24 hours. Things will hopefully change a bit, though, a little bit farther out in time. So let's talk about that track now. Believe it or not, even though this has winds of 185 miles an hour, or 180 miles an hour, it's actually forecast to go to 185 with gusts to 225. It's one of the most exceptional hurricanes that we have on record. It will continue into Tuesday as a Category 5, winds of 173, and even later into Tuesday with winds of 160. We're going to talk a lot more about the shear that will hopefully begin to impact this storm somewhere between 12 and 18 hours out prior to landfall, but the forecast is there for it to be some minor weakening. But I want to be clear, friends, that we are still talking about a major hurricane of Category 3 strength potentially moving into the Tampa Bay area, again, very late Wednesday or early on Thursday. The official forecast from the Hurricane Center, winds of 130 miles an hour with gusts to 155. That is a category, well, the 127, that's going to be a Category 3 hurricane as it moves inland, all right? It's an exceptionally significant storm and one that will have very broad impacts. Yes, the core winds and the highest storm surge will be near that center or just to the south, but the overall impacts that Florida is going to see is going to be widespread and extremely significant. This is one of the most highest end storms that especially West Central Florida has ever seen. So that's what the current track is from the Hurricane Center. Please note, by the way, that this is forecast to move into the Orlando metro area still as a hurricane. As a matter of fact, even offshore of Brevard and Volusia County, it's still a Cat 1. That means that hurricane conditions are likely in the Orlando metro area, which is why they are currently under a hurricane warning as well. We're going to get some rain ahead of it. That's certainly going to be a story for us here, but obviously down the road, it's what this storm is going to be bringing late Wednesday and early on Thursday. So I've got a ton of information to talk about here. We'll first of all start off with the timing of the system. Again, there's a lot of evacuations that are being issued right now, and if you are in an evacuation zone and you're told to get out of there, I hope you do. You can continue to prepare, but your preparations for this storm should be done by early on Tuesday, because we could start to see the arrival of tropical storm force winds along the west coast of Florida as early as Wednesday morning. The weather just goes downhill throughout the day, and obviously the big impacts come late Wednesday and early Thursday. For the northwest Bahamas, they'll begin to move in on Wednesday evening, and then more significant impacts early Thursday, maybe even into Thursday afternoon. I'm not expecting right now hurricane conditions in the northwestern Bahamas for our friends there, but tropical storm conditions are a possibility. Let's start to look at some of the models here. We're going to deep dive into all of this. We'll start off with the GFS model, okay? Now again, in the previous video I did earlier today, you can almost ignore the pressures that you see because these models are initializing this storm way too weak, right? The initial pressure is 905 millibars. So it's more about the track, all right? The GFS model begins this recurve back to the north and to the east with landfall just north of the Tampa Bay area here as we get into early on Thursday. Now, this will be important for Tampa Bay because if they're either near the center or on the south side, that means they get all of the storm surge. And by the way, that storm surge forecast has been kicked up a notch because of the intensity that we have right now with Milton. But you can clearly see again a very impressive storm coming up towards the west coast as we get into early on Thursday morning. The European model, again, is about the same progression here. I want you to note it's slightly south, but the center does take it right over Tampa Bay. And again, the timing would be just after midnight into early Thursday morning. We're still going to be looking at models that have some solutions as far north as the Nature Coast, as far south as the Charlotte Harbor area, Port Charlotte area, but most of them are kind of honing in a little bit more on the Tampa Bay area, give or take north or south by a fairly small degree. If we look at the European ensemble members, these are the 51 different members of that deterministic model I just showed you. So basically what they're saying is, out in time, here's where we think that the storm could be, the center. Notice that some of the faster ones here by early on Thursday already have it off of the east coast of Florida, but the majority of the plots here right around 1 a.m. on Thursday have it moving close to the Tampa area. The European model is one of the slightly farther south models. You notice there's a bit more clustering even just south of Tampa into Sarasota County and as far south as the Port Charlotte area, and not as many members up towards the north. So that is one of the members, one of the models that keeps it a little bit to the south. Now this HAFS-A model is very interesting. It's actually initialized the best with the storm. So it actually has the deepest pressures associated with it. Notice though, how we start to see that wind field and that pressure begin to rise as it gets closer to the coast on Wednesday. This is good. This is what we want to see. That would be the wind shear that's going to try and at least knock apart the inner part of the storm, that inner core somewhat before it moves in. So while the maximum winds might come down, unfortunately, that's not going to really do a lot to the storm surge. And friends, we've talked about it in our live streams before. It is not the wind that is the deadliest part of a hurricane. It is the water inundation. And that storm surge has me extremely concerned. Let's talk about how that wind shear is going to impact the storm. This HAFS-A model shows it very clearly. Notice near the Yucatan, it's a really tight, compact storm. But in the last 12 hours before landfall, look at how those brighter reds and even that white begins to expand. That's the impact of the wind shear beginning to try and knock down the inner core. But it allows the wind field to get larger, and so the hurricane actually gets larger, and the ultimate impacts are, although you might not have the highest topped winds, you're going to have a larger wind field of hurricane force conditions. It will be a larger storm as it moves into the west coast of Florida. So while the wind shear is good in one respect, it's not completely beneficial because of how it's going to expand the wind field of the hurricane force winds, right? This is the HAFS-A model, same one I just showed you. This is going to be, again, just after midnight on Thursday. It's the exact same plot that the Hurricane Center has. That timing has been pushed back. So we're now looking at landfall, very late Wednesday or early on Thursday morning. So unfortunately, this would be a nighttime storm. All of the areas in purple are major hurricane force winds, okay? I want you to notice that encompasses all of Tampa Bay, all right? So we would expect, even with a weakening storm, and again, we're starting off with a storm of 180 mile an hour winds. We might knock it down 50 mile an hour, but it's still a 130 coming into Tampa Bay. And all of that purple are hurricane force winds, major hurricane force winds. And unfortunately, again, the inundation of water that could come with that track could be catastrophic for Tampa Bay. Farther south, we still have onshore winds. And even if this storm tracks into Tampa Bay like this, even down towards Charlotte Harbor, they could get 5 to 10 foot storm surge. And even up in the Nature Coast, Crystal River area south, when the north winds kick back in, they could have a surge of water as well. Not as significant. You'd rather be on the north side, but it just shows you how expansive this wind field is going to be. This is the HWRF model. It's 1:30. You can clearly see that bottom right-hand side of your screen. It's even slightly later. This is 5 a.m. on Thursday, and the eye hasn't come on shore. Now, the eye on the HWRF model, and as it has been, is slightly north of Tampa Bay, kind of more into Pasco County, maybe even Hernando County. But again, south side, there's your counterclockwise winds. There's all the onshore flow going with the storm motion, and significant storm surge is likely there as well. Real quickly, guys, as we get into the rest of the forecast, I thank you for liking this video, subscribing, sharing this with your family and friends, and I appreciate you guys supporting the channel as well. So now let's talk about some of the different impacts that I expect that we're going to see. Now, I can throw back on these spaghetti plots as I did again in the previous video that I did, and you'll note that on these spaghetti plots, I think the easiest way to see this is just to take off the satellite data. I want you guys to notice our tropical models are either near the center line from the hurricane center or slightly to the south. But the overall average of the models is either along the line from the center or slightly north. That's why the Hurricane Center is sticking with this outcome as of yet. They think that these models are slightly too far south overall. Now, there is still a spread, and there is still a possibility we could have a landfall even up in the Nature Coast or all the way back down towards Cape Coral. It does look like the Tampa Bay area is probably going to be, an area that will continue to be close to the center line over the next day or two, with maybe some subtle shifts, but more than likely nothing extremely widespread to really push this thing too far north and south. And I'll show you why coming up. But you can clearly see what that is going to be bringing. Now, let's talk about how this is going to evolve with the rain to begin with, and how, again, the shear is going to impact the storm as well. So I'm going to pull up the GFS model, and we've already taken a look at the winds and the pressure out of the GFS, but we'll look at that even a little bit more here coming up. So let me, again, drop off some of this data that you see, just because it's a little bit easier. I've mentioned it in the last video. I know I keep harping on that, but if you watch the last video, some of this I have discussed already. The storm doesn't look crazy impressive right as it tries to move inland, right? You can clearly see that the southern and eastern side of the eye wall tries to get exposed on the GFS model. That's the wind shear. We're going to have really strong northwest winds at the upper levels of the atmosphere trying to rip this storm apart. The question is, does the intercore hold together? Because if it does, we're still going to have a really tight, compact core of major hurricane force winds. If it can begin to expose that eye just a little bit more, those winds might lighten a bit. But the problem is, I know that the southeast side of the storm doesn't look very impressive for rain. And there may be a dry slot where the storm actually looks very oblong as it comes on shore, but there is actually still forecast to be a tremendous amount of wind on the southeast side, regardless if there's heavy rain. So I do want to be clear about this. The winds are still forecast to be extremely symmetrical, despite the fact that the rainfall may favor the northern side as the drier air gets entrained into the back end of the storm. But the drier air coming from the upper and the mid levels of the storm gets pushed down to the surface, and you can have extremely strong gusts on the back end side of this storm. So don't let that radar signature fool you to what the wind profile might be, because it could be extremely, extremely significant. Let me show you it on the GFS model. All right. Again, doesn't look extremely fantastic as far as, you know, the rain, but when we look at the winds coming in, you can still see that even on the southeast side of the storm, right, where we would have not as much rain moving into Manatee and Sarasota counties and then off towards the east into Polk County, if it stays on this track, and again, it's still subject to change. This is still just, you know, models we're taking a look at here, and we could have some subtle shifts. We're still expected to have very significant winds here. Now, again, the GFS, these are sustained winds, they're too weak right now based on what we've seen, but I just want to show you that profile is there. If I switch over to the gusts, and we'll take a look at that, you can clearly see on the gusts that same scenario. So let me loop up the wind gusts, and those will be much more prominent here. And the gusts are going to be important because with the rain that we've already seen, we have a saturated ground, all right? And those gusts can take over and knock down some very large trees, and I think power outages are going to be a major problem even deep inland, maybe even through the East Coast. So if you look at the GFS gusts here, notice again that even though we have drier air south and east, the wind profile is very symmetric overall, where again you have triple-digit winds at least coming back in on both sides of the storm, and then even deeper into the southeast, you still have winds that are very significant here. Let's go one more step in time. You see those winds beginning to push inland. As I mentioned for the Orlando metro area, the opportunity to see some hurricane force gusts, probably 75, maybe 80 miles an hour, not sustained, but in gusts. And some of those strong winds on the GFS, which is slightly north, would push into Citrus and Hernando counties as well. And then one more step out into time. This is 9 a.m. basically on our Thursday morning on the GFS. Now you start to see those high-end tropical storm with some hurricane force gusts making it into Brevard and Volusia counties and up towards Flagler County and then inland into Marion County as well. Now, obviously, this wind field is going to expand and weaken as it does so, but just note that even though the radar signature didn't look extremely impressive, the wind field will be. And that wind field is going to cause some power problems and knock down some trees and, you know, going to be some big time issues for a lot of different people. So let's take a look at those impacts. Again, and this was my concern earlier today, that the peak storm surge wasn't high enough. Well, the Hurricane Center has upped it a bit. and it's very widespread. Again, all the way into the Panhandle, to Indian Pass, to the Swanee River, the areas most impacted by Helene, 1 to 3 feet. We can handle that. That's okay. 3 to 5, though, as you get down towards Yankeetown, then it starts to get concerning. 5 to 10 down to Anclote Key. Tampa Bay storm surge is now forecast to be 10 to 15 feet. This is the catastrophic part of this storm right now. The winds are going to be a huge problem, don't get me wrong, but to push 10 to 15 feet of water into Tampa Bay, an extremely populated area with a lot of that near the coastline, is extremely worrisome. Again, if you're in an evacuation zone and you're told to evacuate, please heed those warnings. You even get down towards Inglewood and we could have 10 feet of water, 6 to 10 in Charlotte Harbor. And let's be clear, that's even if this storm hits Tampa Bay. If it goes farther off towards the south, those numbers would grow higher. 4 to 7 back down towards, I believe that's Chocolate, and then 2 to 4 for the dry Tortugas, 1 to 3 in the Florida Keys. We'll get the overwash coming back into portions of the East Coast. So you're looking at 2 to 4 from Sebastian Inlet to Flagler-Volusia County line, and then up to the Georgia coastline as well, and 1 to 3 feet for the South Carolina coastline up to the South Santee River. Rainfall, again, is going to be significant. This is the European model. It will bring some heavier rain, 5-10 inches locally higher. Again, the European model is picked up on this as well, this dry slot in the southeast side. Not as much rain, but the winds are going to be significant. For my friends in the Bahamas, we're still looking at 3, 4, maybe even 6 inches of rain. Locally heavy rainfall. Again, not hurricane conditions, but some tropical storm wind gusts. I'll show you that in a minute coming up as well. But get prepared, especially in Walker's Key and Grand Bahama and the Abacos and Bimini, for some heavy rain and very squally conditions. And you know those surf and sea conditions are going to be kicked up big time as well. All right, so let's take a look at that for my friends in the Bahamas. I'm going to take this a little bit out in time. And again, we're not going to see the strongest winds, but here are your gusts, here towards Walker's Key, that are pushing easily into tropical storm force category, right? We're still potentially going to have some 40-mile-an-hour gusts for High Rock and Freeport and Lucaya and West End, Little Abaco and Marsh Harbor towards Great Abaco, 35. Bimini, hopefully a little bit weaker, and then it does tail off after that. Again, this is, if the GFS model holds true, it is slightly farther north and west than the other models. If the European model is the one that actually ends up winning out, we could have a little bit more in the way of wind in the Bahamas. Notice that the southern cone of uncertainty brushes Walker's Key, but based on what I'm seeing right now, I would not expect sustained hurricane conditions in the northwest Bahamas, but big time swells will be coming in. I touched on that in last video, and again, I'll touch on that more coming up in the next couple of days as well, but some big time issues there. So my friends who live in Florida, you need to take this as seriously as you've ever taken anything. It's as simple as that. The wind field is going to be extremely wide. The impacts are going to be felt extremely wide as well. And again, this storm, we have to cross our fingers that it actually comes down to a category 3. All right. So let's talk about the preps. Your preps should be done by Tuesday morning. I hope everything is done by then, because you need to be wherever you need to be by Tuesday night. All right. If you need to know if you're in an evacuation zone, first of all, and if you're ordered to evacuate, please do so. Rescuers will not be able to come get you. All right. You're going to be on your own and isolated if you're staying, especially in an area that's forecast to have extremely high storm surge, like the Tampa Bay area. You need to also prepare for the possibility to be without power for several days. Again, power outages with tree damage are going to come along for the ride, as significant as the winds are going to be and as wide as that wind field is expected to become as well. All right, now it's time to get into the rest of the forecast, and I appreciate my friends across the Caribbean and the Bahamas sticking with me here through what's been going on with Milton. Obviously, this is a storm. I'm going to have continued updated videos. We'll be doing some live, and I'll talk more about our coverage plans coming up here as we get into our Tuesday. Let's get back into what's going on right now across our area. We've had some heavy showers and storms today, once again over portions of the Leeward Islands, portions of Trinidad. We've tried to scrape a few showers near Tobago. You can see the live lightning there here at Meteo Mundo. Let me bring that back up into play, bring up the lightning count. There you go. So good. Thunderstorms, heavier rain, flooding. There's another flood watch for Barbados right now. Trinidad, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, on over towards portions of Martinique and Dominica and Guadeloupe. It is island dependent, but we've had some heavier showers and storms in these areas. So locally heavy rainfall. It's quieter today up in the Leeward Islands, Antigua, Barbuda, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Eustatius, Saba, St. Bart's, St. Martin, and Anguilla. But we've had a couple of passing showers and storms there. This is the visible satellite imagery. I'll pop on real quick, and you can see some of those higher, brighter white cloud tops indicating the opportunity for a few scattered showers and storms in that area. Relatively quiet across the Virgin Islands for today. If you caught one of those isolated, quick-moving showers, let me know in the comments section below. I appreciate that. We've had a few storms develop over portions of Puerto Rico at the hour. Again, they've been relatively more isolated today than anything else. Haven't seen anything too significant there. A few more showers and storms developing over portions of the Dominican Republic and Haiti. But again, it's been a relatively quieter forecast. When I bring on the water vapor imagery, you can actually see there's a fair amount of red behind what is a extremely powerful hurricane. We've actually seen some drier air come back into the Lesser and Greater Antilles for today, and that does include portions of Jamaica and the Cayman Islands as well. So all of the moisture has been shunted up to the north and to the west. I know you guys see this little yellow area here. By the way, that's a 10% chance to develop it. It's not expected to develop. I'll keep an eye on it, but there was just a very broad center. And maybe if you live in the Northwest Bahamas, you saw, you kind of saw some of that eerie cloud movement for today as this broad mid-level low is trying to get wrapped up. But it's a 10% chance. I don't expect it to be anything. Call it a nothing burger right now. If it were to come up to something, I'll let you guys know. Some of those thicker clouds and a few showers have extended back into the central sides of the Bahamas on this Monday afternoon. A few more showers over Cuba, and we've had some of that tail back down into Belize. But again, it's been relatively quieter with all of this moisture being pushed up to the north, and it's been more scattered rain than anything else for portions of Central America. But relatively speaking, a lot of spots have seen some drier weather, trying to get a few showers and storms over Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao, but not a lot, at least in the short term. So let's go back over to the rainfall over the next couple of days. Take this out one more afternoon. We still have, by the way, Leslie out here. I don't want to just completely say Leslie's gone. It's not. It's an 80-mile-an-hour hurricane, but again, it's a fish storm moving away, and we're really actually done with Kirk. We don't even have track on it anymore, but it could spin up and be a mid-level cyclone for portions of Europe. Very interesting storm there, but again, it's a bye-bye. We do have this week 20% chance out here in the far eastern Atlantic with a system coming off of the West African coast, a tropical wave, but again, no real signs of concerns at this point in time trying to gain north latitude in a hurry. Lesser Antilles, scattered showers and storms will continue, still favoring the Windward Islands, Barbados, St. Lucia and Grenadines, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago. Those are the spots I expect the most rainfall over the next 3 days. Locally heavy rainfall could lead to some isolated flooding. Again, watch out for some flood watches issued in your area. It's 25 to 75 millimeters of rain in a couple of spots. It'll be spottier. Martinique, Dominica, on over towards Guadeloupe and North Montserrat, Antigua and Barbuda included, but some passing showers are expected. Same situation for my friends in St. Thomas, St. Croix, and St. John, and the British Virgin Islands as well. Puerto Rico, passing showers. Watch out for heat advisories. The heat might actually be the bigger story. We're going to try and get a bit more rain in the Dominican Republic and Haiti the next couple of days, but it's still just kind of trying to build up. And I don't expect there to be a lot of rain in Jamaica as well. My friends in Kingston and Negrilla, Montego Bay, it's spotty rain, a couple of showers from time to time. Heat index, by the way, could be approaching 110 Fahrenheit. That's 43 degrees Celsius. Again, especially in those days that we don't catch any showers. Going to get a little bit more activity coming back into Central America beginning on Wednesday. So for Honduras and Nicaragua, especially south towards Costa Rica and Panama, still slightly drier once Milton exits stage right for Belize and Guatemala and the Yucatan as well. And again, I hope we stay relatively unscathed in the northern side of the Yucatan Peninsula, and obviously the inundation of some heavier rain here. If we take a look at the GFS model for rainfall, I showed you the European. Again, the GFS model is also agreeing with the dry slot on the southeast side of the storm. Again, high winds here, but it does look like the heaviest rain is going to bear out on the northern side of the storm. So kind of well away. I mean, Tampa will get enough rain and certainly the storm surge to cause some problems. I mean, there's still going to be more than a half foot of rain here, but some of the heaviest rain may actually be up in Hernando and Citrus and Marion counties, and then actually head on over towards St. Augustine on the northern band of kind of the, of where we really have Milton, not the feeder bands that are too far outside. Let me be clear as well, although the south central part of the state might be slightly drier, bands coming up the east coast could still bring some heavier rain for portions of the southeast side of Florida. So I don't want to just not talk about West Palm and Miami and those areas. They're not going to get the persistent strong winds, but some of these bands coming up could provide some heavier downpours, and there is the opportunity for some isolated severe weather, including the form of flooding as well. Friends, not only will I be doing some updates here, but also on our sister channel, Central Florida Weather Live. You can find the link to that channel in the description in this video. If you look at the description below, you will find the link to Central Florida Weather Live. You can always just search it on YouTube at Central Florida Weather, all one word. Look for that logo. That's our sister channel. I will be doing some live broadcasting on that because this storm will be impacting Central Florida as well. So make sure you subscribe to that channel and have those notifications on. You can also follow Meteo Mundo across all of our other social media platforms, Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. You want to send me a picture or video, mymeteomundo@gmail.com. My friends in West Central Florida, let me be very clear. Please take this storm as seriously as you've ever taken any storm to date. This could be a catastrophic storm. I hate to say it, but that opportunity is there from what we've been looking at for today. Let us hope it weakens some, but more than likely it's still going to be a major hurricane late Wednesday as it moves into the West Central Florida area. Friends, thank you for liking this video, subscribing to Meteo Mundo. I will be back very soon with the latest for you guys right here at Meteo Mundo.